Welcome back to Introduction to Humanities. Today we're going to be talking about dance. What is dance? Well, dance actually has some things in common with both sculpture and theater. And your text describes dance as moving bodies shaping space. And that's similar language to what we were reading about and sharing in class when we discussed sculpture. So, really, the shaping of space is what sculpture and dance both have in common. And the medium is the human body, just like theater. So, it sort of has some similarities to both of those things, and it's usually also accompanied by music. The subject matter of dance is feeling, okay? And if we participate with a dance, we can understand the feelings that are expressed. Your text states that more than any other genre, probably, dance expresses feeling. And because the medium of dance is the human body, and we have a human body, we can often personally relate to dance on a much deeper level, because as we see a feeling expressed, we can kind of start to feel it ourselves. And just as with a painting, there are abstract dances and there are more narrative dances. And so, again, when we talk about something abstract, we're talking about something that does not represent anything out in the world. But its focus instead is on the visual patterns it's making or creating. And we're just free to enjoy something that's visually interesting. But dance is usually more of a narrative, meaning it's telling some kind of a story. Form. Okay, form is a little more difficult to determine in dance because it moves so quickly, right? When we consider form in a painting or in a sculpture or in a work of architecture, it's stationary. It's not going anywhere. We can examine it from multiple perspectives. We can take our time. But with dance, its moves are fleeting. And so our memory becomes very important because it helps us compare the movements that we see and helps us to determine what is being expressed in that particular work. Dance will often repeat movements or create variations of them. So, one tip is to pay attention to the things that are repeated because usually those are the most important. Dance is considered the first art of a culture because it is or was, depending on the time frame, part of rituals in most cultures. Okay, so a couple common patterns we see as it relates to ritual would be the spiral nautilus. Also, the circular patterns are repeated, which it's trying to sort of mimic shapes that are found in nature. Circular patterns are very common. And back sort of in these ancient days, people would dance in these kind of patterns as a way of connecting with nature, connecting with the gods. And it was meant to kind of evoke a response from them. Origins of dance, there were sort of a few. There's courtship here, courtship rituals, pagan rituals, and then dances that imitated nature. So, think, a dancer might try to imitate a reed swaying in the wind or the breeze, or waves crashing onto a beach, or, anything along those lines. Social and court dance, as time went on, dance became less of maybe a religious or practical motivation and became more for recreation and enjoyment. So think about country dances that, were often tied to celebrations during the year, like planting or harvest, or folk dances that preserve culture. You can think about something like a river dance or something along those lines. Something that's very highly connected with culture. A court dance, which is what's shown here, is an exhibition of high social class. And this became prevalent in the Middle Ages or the Renaissance period. So people trying to kind of achieve a certain class or show off a certain class became very much connected with social standing. Ballet originated in the early 17th century. Kind of interesting to think about. I guess until I started teaching the humanities, I never really realized that ballet is a fairly new form of dance. It doesn't go back that far. But the ballet sort of evolved as sort of an intermission kind of entertainment between opera scenes. And the ballets usually were built around some sort of narrative, some sort of story. And as you may know, if you've seen a ballet, the movement is very, very rigid. The dancers dance on point on their toes. Arms and legs are emphasized, and it's somewhat, it's graceful, but it's some of the movements are very rigid. And compared to more modern dances. Um, Specific movements like arabesque or pirouettes help tell a story. A couple famous ballets, The Nutcracker, Swan Lake, and The Rite of Spring. Just a few to know there. Oops, move that. Oh dear. Okay, I'm having trouble moving this back. Come on. Okay, well, let's move on. Okay, modern dance. The reaction against rigidity in the rules of ballet resulted in a type of dance that was just more freeing. And it was attributed to Isadora Duncan and Ruth St. Denis, both Americans. Um, Ballet really repeats a lot of the same movements in every dance, and the dancers are dancing on their toes. And like I say, it's sort of somewhat rigid. It's very highly stylized, and so this kind of dancing was a complete reaction against it. Modern dance emphasizes the torso, lots of movement in the torso, whereas in ballet, the torso is rather stiff and doesn't move very much. But for modern dance, the torso is moving, the emphasis is on natural movement, and often they are dancing in bare feet, which is very different. They're not dancing on their toes or anything like that, not necessarily even pointing their toes. So it's very different, and it's usually more of an abstract style of dance, more freeing. Okay. One of the greatest and most prevalent and popular of modern dances is Alvin Ailey's Revelations. This was first performed in 1960, was very successful and still is very successful, and it's really based on African American spirituals and experience. So you want to talk about a dance that's narrative, this certainly is, because it's telling a story. And it's divided into three different parts. The first part is called The Pilgrim of Sorrow, and the emphasis is on suffering. It likens the African American experience to Israelites being in Egypt, this idea of slavery. And then we've got Take Me to the Water. So this part emphasizes faith in God, looking to, someone who can relieve that suffering. And then the last part is Move, Members Move. And this is emphasizing triumph over suffering and then forgiveness, kind of moving on. And so it's sort of telling this story of the African American experience. So this is Alvin Ailey's Revelations, and you'll see a clip of this linked in Brightspace. Martha Graham is another. Her approach is slightly more like ballet, closer to ballet, very different from Ailey, a bit more rigorous and more disciplined. But after Isadora Duncan, she's considered to be the most influential person in modern dance. And her specific techniques and movements people call the Graham technique. So she's very famous in dance. Oops. Okay. The Bathsheba Dance Company. This was founded by Martha Graham and Baroness Bathsheba Rothschild in Tel Aviv, Israel. Now run by Ohad Nahirin, and it's known for its imaginative and risk-taking dances. So people are really trying to imitate certain things. One of the examples in your text is this Gaga movement, which is a special movement where a dancer is kind of imitating a snake using their spine. But you can see some interesting shirt flying there in the air. But this is very unique style of dance, and I believe this is also linked in Brightspace. The Pillobus, or Pillobulus, there we go, and Momix Dance Companies. These are they're very interesting. They focus more on, again, when we're talking about abstract dances, we're talking about, something that looks visually interesting. This certainly is, because the dancers focus not as much on telling a story as they do by creating these complex visual shapes, often on a reflective floor like it's shown here, um, and very acrobatic in nature. So this is very interesting. It almost looks, to me, she looks like a spider because of the reflective floor. It looks like she has so many different, limbs. Very interesting. Okay. Um, Theater dance. Dance is often vital to live theater, supporting a narrative. So, there are many forms of theater where there is no dance, but musical theater many times does feature dance. So, consider West Side Story, for example, which is a story that's loosely based on Romeo and Juliet, based on migrants in New York. Or Contact, your text talks about, which is a story only told by dance with no dialogue. So, the whole story is being conveyed through human movement, which is sort of interesting. And then we kind of come up now to present. I'll just name off some of the most popular of these popular dances. The early 20th century saw the Charleston, the 30s and 40s swing and jitterbug. My grandma was a big jitterbug fan. 1950s was rock dancing, 70s moved into disco, the 80s saw the emergence of breakdancing, and then finally 90s was hip hop dance. So we can see that dance is really ever evolving. It's started basically in the beginning, since the beginning of humankind, and it's still going and it's still changing today. So when we discuss a dance, we're going to be looking at some of these dances. There's only so much I can tell you in a PowerPoint. Really, a lot of it we just have to see for ourselves. So we're going to be looking at some clips this week, and we're going to be making some comparisons and be thinking about content. We're going to be thinking about some of the moves that are used and some of the feeling that's provoked by it. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with dance. And so that concludes our PowerPoint for this week.